Thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline as rain poured from a merciless October sky. Robert Blackwell gripped the leather steering wheel of his Bentley, knuckles white against the storm. 52 years had carved lines of authority into his face, but tonight something else etched those features. A premonition. After 3 weeks of back-to-back meetings across Europe, he had cut short the Tokyo conference, driven by an instinct he couldn't name. The gates of the Blackwell estate parted like silent sentinels. Robert checked his watch, 9:17 p.m. He hadn't told Catherine he was coming home early. The element of surprise had seemed romantic this morning when he boarded his private jet. Now, as rain hammered against the windshield, it felt like something else entirely. The mansion loomed ahead, windows glowing amber against the storm. Robert parked and stepped out, the rain immediately soaking his tailored suit. He'd left his umbrella in Tokyo, along with the culmination of a billion-dollar merger. None of that mattered now. He'd bring his daughter Sarah the doll he'd purchased in Paris, a collector's item with eyes the same shade of blue as hers. A sound cut through the rainfall, faint, distant, yet it froze Robert in place. "Ba ơi, con không thở được." The voice was barely audible, a desperate whisper in the storm. Robert's heart seized. It was Sarah's voice, speaking the Vietnamese phrase his late wife Jennifer had taught her. "Daddy, I can't breathe." Robert dropped his briefcase, splashing through puddles toward the back garden. The sound of water splashing, different from the rainfall, grew louder. A woman's voice, sharp and venomous, sliced through the night. "Useless little cripple, why don't you just disappear?" Robert rounded the corner of the house, and the scene before him shattered his world into irreparable fragments. Sarah, his 7-year-old daughter, lay sprawled on the wet flagstones of the garden patio. Her blue dress clung to her tiny frame, soaked through. Her wheelchair lay toppled several feet away. Above her stood Catherine, Robert's wife of 1 year, her elegant figure silhouetted against the garden lights, one manicured hand tilting a pitcher of ice water directly over the child's face. "Please," Sarah whimpered, her small hands raised in futile defense. "I can't breathe." "Stop!" Robert's voice thundered across the garden. Catherine froze, the pitcher still tilted, water still streaming. Her head snapped up, golden hair whipping around her face. For one unguarded moment, Robert saw something terrifying in her eyes. Not surprise at being caught, but fury at being interrupted. Then, like a switch had been flipped, her expression transformed into one of shock and concern. Robert was already moving, crossing the distance in long strides, his Italian leather shoes sinking into the sodden grass. He dropped to his knees beside Sarah, gathering her trembling body into his arms. Her skin felt like ice, blue-tinged lips quivering as she struggled to breathe. "Daddy's here," he whispered, pressing his daughter close. "Daddy's here now." Sarah's fingers clutched at his shirt collar, her eyes wide with a fear no child should know. "You came back," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll never leave you again," Robert promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Never." The words hung in the rain-soaked air between them, and Robert was suddenly transported back 2 years, to a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and grief. Jennifer, his wife of 15 years, lay surrounded by machines that beeped in cruel countdown. Her once vibrant face hollowed by cancer, yet her eyes still held the fierce light that had captivated him from the moment they'd met at Northwestern University. "Promise me," Jennifer had whispered, her fingers surprisingly strong as they gripped his. "Promise you'll always be there for Sarah. You'll protect her, no matter what." "I promise," he'd said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Yet in the 24 months since Jennifer's passing, Robert had buried himself in Blackwell Technologies, expanding operations across 3 continents, as if conquering new markets could somehow fill the void her absence had created. Meanwhile, Sarah, bright, beautiful Sarah, had been left with a succession of nannies until Catherine had entered their lives. Catherine stepped forward now, her expression a perfect mask of distress. "Robert, you're home early. Thank God you're here." "I was just trying to cool her down. She had a fever. She was hallucinating." The lie hung between them, as tangible as the rain. Robert looked at his wife, truly looked at her for perhaps the first time since their whirlwind courtship. Catherine Pierce Blackwell stood 5'10" in her bare feet, her slender frame emphasized by designer loungewear that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 36, she was 16 years his junior, with golden blonde hair that cascaded past her shoulders and striking features that had once graced the covers of fashion magazines. To the world, she was the perfect trophy wife, beautiful, charming, polished. But now, with rain plastering her silk blouse to her skin, Robert saw something else, something cold and calculating behind those green eyes. "Sarah doesn't have a fever," Robert said quietly, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "And that's not how you cool someone down." Catherine's perfect features contorted briefly before she regained control. "You don't understand. She was having one of her episodes," the doctor said. "Which doctor?" Robert demanded, rising to his feet with Sarah still cradled in his arms. The child weighed almost nothing, her body curled against him like a wounded bird. "Dr. Reynolds," Catherine answered smoothly. "I told you about him last month." Another lie. There had been no Dr. Reynolds, no conversation. Robert had checked every medical appointment, managed every aspect of Sarah's care following the accident that had taken Jennifer's life, and left their daughter paralyzed from the waist down. Or so he'd thought. "We'll discuss this inside," Robert said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "after I've taken care of my daughter." He carried Sarah through the French doors into the warmth of the house, conscious of Catherine following several paces behind. The mansion's interior glowed with understated luxury, Italian marble, original artwork, furniture selected by one of Chicago's most exclusive designers. None of it mattered. In that moment, the trappings of his success seemed obscene compared to the weight of the shivering child in his arms. As Robert crossed the great room toward the stairs, he noticed three women seated in the conversation area, champagne flutes in hand. They stared, conversation dying mid-sentence. One of them, Diane Mercer, the wife of a prominent surgeon, rose halfway from her seat. "Robert, what a surprise!" she exclaimed, eyes darting between him and Catherine. "We were just having a little ladies' night. Is everything all right?" Before Robert could answer, Catherine swept past him, social grace incarnate despite her rain-dampened appearance. "Everything's fine, Diane. Sarah had a little fall outside, and Robert's going to get her cleaned up. Please continue your conversation. I'll be right back." Robert continued up the grand staircase without acknowledging the guests. Sarah's small arms clung to his neck, her breathing ragged against his chest. When they reached her bedroom, a princess paradise of soft pinks and lavenders that Jennifer had designed, he gently placed her on the bed and began removing her soaked clothing. "Let's get you warm and dry, sweetheart," he murmured, reaching for the pajamas laid out on the chair. It was then he saw them, the bruises. Purple-blue marks mottled Sarah's upper arms. Yellowish discoloration spread across her ribcage, in various stages of healing. A ring of finger-shaped bruises circled her left wrist like a macabre bracelet. Robert's blood turned to ice. "Sarah," he whispered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "How did you get these marks?" Sarah's eyes darted to the door, then back to her father's face. Fear, raw and primal, flashed across her features. "I fell," she whispered mechanically, "from my wheelchair." The practiced response broke Robert's heart. He'd heard those exact words from Catherine over video calls when he'd noticed Sarah looking withdrawn. "I'm worried about her," Catherine had said, her brow creased with apparent concern. "She keeps falling from her wheelchair. Maybe we should look into a special harness." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Martha Davis, the Blackwell family's longtime housekeeper, entered carrying a tray with hot chocolate and dry towels. At 65, Martha had been with them since before Sarah was born, her gray-streaked hair always pulled back in a neat bun, her movements efficient and purposeful. "I thought Miss Sarah might need warming up," Martha said, her eyes meeting Robert's briefly. Something unspoken passed between them, knowledge perhaps, or guilt. "Thank you, Martha," Robert said, taking a towel and gently drying Sarah's hair. "Would you stay with Sarah while I have a word with Mrs. Blackwell?" "Of course, sir," Martha replied, her voice revealing nothing. Yet as Robert moved toward the door, she added quietly, "It's good to have you home, Mr. Blackwell." The weight of those simple words followed Robert down the hallway toward the master suite. Catherine stood at her vanity, already changed into dry clothes, applying lipstick as if preparing for a dinner party rather than explaining why she had been torturing a paralyzed child. "You need to tell me exactly what happened out there," Robert said, closing the bedroom door behind him. Catherine turned, her expression perfectly calibrated to show concern. "Sarah was being difficult about taking her medicine. You know how stubborn she can be. She knocked the water out of my hand and then tried to wheel away, but she tipped over. I was trying to help her. By pouring ice water over her face while she gasped for breath?" Robert kept his voice level, though every instinct screamed at him to rage. Catherine's eyes hardened momentarily before she crossed the room, placing her hands on Robert's chest. Darling, you're exhausted from your trip. You misunderstood what you saw. I would never hurt Sarah. She's like my own daughter. The endearment, once cherished, now felt like acid on his skin. Robert stepped back, breaking contact. I know what I saw, Catherine. And I saw the bruises. Something flickered behind Catherine's eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or the recalibration of strategy. The bruises are from her physical therapy sessions. Dr. Lewis said some bruising is normal with her condition. Another name Robert didn't recognize. Another claimed medical professional who had apparently been treating his daughter without his knowledge. I want all of Sarah's medical records, Robert said. Every appointment, every diagnosis, every prescription. By tomorrow morning. Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, darling, whatever will put your mind at ease. She moved toward him again. Now why don't you shower and change? Your guests are waiting downstairs. James is coming over later with those contract revisions you wanted. James Reed, Catherine's cousin, and coincidentally the attorney who had been handling more and more of Blackwell Technologies' legal affairs since Catherine and Robert's marriage. The mention of his name did another layer of unease to Robert's growing suspicions. I'm not interested in contracts tonight, Robert said, and I'd appreciate it if you'd ask your friends to leave. We need to talk about what I saw. Catherine's perfect mask slipped for just a second, long enough for Robert to glimpse the cold fury beneath. Then it was gone, replaced by wounded understanding. Of course, you're tired. I'll make your excuses. As she moved past him toward the door, Robert caught her arm. One more thing, Catherine. Until we sort this out, you are not to be alone with Sarah. Not for a minute, is that clear? Catherine looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. The look in her eyes sent a chill through Robert's spine. Not fear as one might expect from someone just issued an ultimatum. Something more like amusement. Crystal clear, darling, she said, her voice honey over steel. Whatever you think is best for our family. After she left, Robert stood in the center of the master bedroom, trying to reconcile the woman he'd just confronted with the one he'd married 11 months ago. Catherine had seemed a godsend when they'd met at a charity gala. Beautiful, yes, but also warm, intelligent, and wonderful with Sarah. The whirlwind romance had culminated in a small, private ceremony in the Blackwell garden. Robert had been grateful to find companionship again, and especially grateful that Sarah would have a mother figure in her life. Now, standing in the room they shared, Robert wondered if he'd ever known Catherine at all. His phone buzzed with an incoming video call. The screen displayed Catherine Mobile. Confused, Robert accepted the call. The image showed Catherine's face, perfectly composed. Robert, darling, I'm headed out with the girls for a bit. Sarah is settled in bed and Martha's with her. Robert frowned. Catherine, you're in the house. I just spoke to you. Catherine's smile widened fractionally. Don't be silly, I'm in the car. The camera panned briefly to show what appeared to be the interior of her Range Rover. You must be more tired than I thought. Get some rest, and we'll talk in the morning. As the call ended, Robert stood frozen, a horrible realization dawning. This was exactly how Catherine had communicated with him throughout his business trips. Video calls that always seemed to catch her away from the house, or with Sarah just napping, or just finished with therapy. He had a sudden vivid memory of the last video call 3 days ago, when Sarah had appeared briefly in the frame, trying to say something before Catherine had smoothly shifted the camera away. She's tired. Let her rest, Catherine had said, her smile serene. Don't worry, I'm taking care of everything. The memory sent Robert racing back to Sarah's room. Martha sat in the chair beside the bed, her weathered hands folded in her lap. Sarah lay beneath the covers, her wet hair now dry, the bruises hidden beneath her pajamas. She's finally asleep, sir, Martha whispered. Poor little lamb was exhausted. Robert nodded, taking the chair on the opposite side of the bed. Martha, he said quietly, how long has this been going on? The housekeeper's eyes remained fixed on Sarah's sleeping form. I don't know what you mean, sir. Yes, you do. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. The bruises, Catherine's treatment of Sarah, I need to know. Martha's shoulders sagged, as if a great weight had finally become too much to bear. I wanted to tell you, sir. Many times, but Mrs. Blackwell, she said she'd have me dismissed without references. At my age, with my sister depending on my income for her care, her voice trailed off, shame evident in every line of her body. How long? Robert repeated. It started small, about 6 months ago, Martha said, her voice barely audible. Harsh words when you weren't around. Then not letting Sarah eat if she didn't finish her exercises. Then she gestured helplessly toward the sleeping child. It got worse after Mr. Reed started coming around more often. James Reed, again that name. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern, though the complete picture remained elusive. Did anyone else see, the nurses, the physical therapists? Martha shook her head. Mrs. Blackwell was always charming when others were present, and she dismissed most of the regular staff shortly after you were married, said they reminded her too much of Mrs. Jennifer. Martha's voice caught on the name of her former employer. The new staff are all her choices. They don't see or they choose not to. Robert's mind raced through the changes of the past year. Staff members he'd known for years suddenly retiring or finding opportunities elsewhere. He'd been too preoccupied with the European expansion to question it, trusting Catherine to manage the household while he secured their financial future. What a fool he'd been. Sir, Martha continued, her voice strengthening, there's something else you should know. Mrs. Blackwell has been taking Miss Sarah to doctors you don't know about. Different ones, not the specialists you arranged. Why would she do that? Martha's eyes met his directly for the first time. I don't know, sir, but she always goes with that cousin of hers, Mr. Reed, and Miss Sarah comes back quieter each time. The implications chilled Robert to the core. What had they been doing to his daughter under the guise of medical treatment, and why? From now on, Sarah is never to be alone with Catherine, Robert said, his decision crystallizing. If I'm not present, you or someone I explicitly approve must be with her. Understood? Martha nodded, relief visible in the loosening of her shoulders. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As if sensing she was the subject of conversation, Sarah stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then recognition dawned, followed immediately by fear. Daddy? She whispered. Is she gone? The question broke Robert's heart anew. Catherine's out for a while, sweetheart. But don't worry. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Sarah's small hand reached for his, fingers intertwining with desperate strength. Promise? The word echoed in Robert's mind, overlaid with Jennifer's voice from that hospital room. Promise me. I promise, Robert said, squeezing his daughter's hand gently. Nothing will ever hurt you again. The tension gradually eased from Sarah's body, her breathing slowing as she drifted back towards sleep. Robert remained at her side, his mind working furiously through what he'd learned and what he needed to do next. A soft buzz from his pocket announced a text message. Carefully extracting his phone without disturbing Sarah, Robert checked the screen. Unknown number. Mr. Blackwell, this is Olivia Chen, Sarah's nurse from Chicago Memorial. We need to talk about your daughter. Privately. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., coffee shop across from the hospital. Please come alone. Robert stared at the message, a cold certainty settling in his gut. Whatever Catherine had been doing, others had noticed. The question was, how deep did this go, and what was her endgame? As if summoned by his thoughts, a shadow passed by the partially open doorway. Too tall for Martha, too purposeful for a casual glance. Robert gently disengaged his hand from Sarah's and moved silently to the door. The hallway was empty, but a faint click from his home office at the end of the corridor caught his attention. Robert moved toward it, footsteps soundless on the plush carpet. The door stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Catherine stood at his desk, the center drawer open, her slender fingers rifling through documents. The Catherine who had supposedly left the house with friends. The same Catherine who had just video called him from her car. For a moment, Robert simply watched, a detached part of his mind noting how efficient her movements were, how she seemed to know exactly what she was looking for. This was not the behavior of someone acting on impulse, but of someone executing a well-considered plan. Looking for something specific? Robert asked, pushing the door fully open. Catherine straightened, not with the startled jump of someone caught unawares, but with the deliberate poise of a predator interrupted. She turned, one hand casually closing the drawer. Robert, I thought you were with Sarah. Her smile was perfect, concerned, loving, with just the right touch of surprise. I was looking for those insurance papers for the new art pieces. The adjuster needs them by tomorrow. Another smooth lie. The insurance documentation was kept in the safe in the library, not in his desk, a fact Catherine knew perfectly well. Funny, Robert said, stepping into the office. I just got a video call from you saying you were heading out with friends. Catherine's smile didn't falter, though something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Oh, that. I recorded that earlier, set it to send automatically. I thought I'd be going out, but then decided to stay and catch up on some paperwork instead. You know how I hate to leave things unfinished. The casual explanation might have worked a day ago when Robert still saw his wife as the caring, organized woman he'd married. Now it rang hollow, each word carefully constructed to maintain a facade that was rapidly crumbling. What's really going on, Catherine? Robert asked, moving closer. The bruises on Sarah, the unknown doctors, the staff changes. What are you doing to my daughter? Something shifted in Catherine's demeanor, a subtle change like a veil being partially lifted. Her smile remained, but it no longer reached her eyes, which had grown calculating and cold. Our daughter, Robert. Or have you forgotten we're a family now? She moved around the desk with practiced grace. Sarah is a troubled child. She resents me because I'm not Jennifer. She hurts herself for attention, then blames me. The doctors confirmed it. Childhood depression manifesting in self-harm. Which doctors? Robert demanded. Not Dr. Winters, who's been treating her since birth. Not Dr. Morris, who managed her rehabilitation after the accident. Which doctors? Catherine. Specialists, Catherine replied smoothly. The best in childhood trauma. I've been trying to protect you from how bad it's gotten. You work so hard, carry so much already. She reached for him, one manicured hand coming to rest on his chest, directly over his heart. Once that touch had been a comfort. Now it felt like a serpent coiling against his skin. Robert stepped back, breaking contact. I want names, credentials, reports, every detail of every appointment you've taken Sarah to without my knowledge. Catherine's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before melting into wounded concern. Of course, darling. First thing tomorrow. But right now you're exhausted. Let me run you a bath, help you relax. You're not thinking clearly. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Robert almost questioned his own perceptions. Was he overreacting? Could there be an innocent explanation for what he'd witnessed in the garden? Then he remembered Sarah's terrified voice. Ba-oi, con kom toduk, and Catherine's venomous tone as she poured ice water over a helpless child. No, there was no innocent explanation. I think I'm seeing more clearly than I have in months, Robert said quietly. And what I see is that I've made a terrible mistake, leaving Sarah in your care. Catherine's mask slipped again, longer this time. Something ugly and vicious flashed across her perfect features before she regained control. You're tired and emotional, she said, her voice taking on the soothing tone one might use with an agitated child. We'll talk in the morning when you've had some rest. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Give you space. She moved toward the door, each step deliberate and controlled. At the threshold, she paused, looking back over one shoulder. Don't do anything rash, Robert. Families have disagreements all the time. It doesn't mean we can't work things out. After she left, Robert remained in his office, the full weight of the situation settling over him like a shroud. It wasn't just about Catherine's treatment of Sarah, though that was horrifying enough. There was something deeper, more calculated at play, something involving James Reed and unknown doctors and Catherine's meticulous dismantling of the support system he'd built for his daughter. But why? What could she possibly gain from hurting a 7-year-old child? Robert moved to his desk and unlocked the hidden compartment beneath the center drawer, a security feature even Catherine didn't know about. Inside lay the documents too sensitive to keep in the main safe. Robert's will, the trust fund details for Sarah, the succession plans for Blackwell Technologies. Everything appeared to be in order, but something nagged at the edge of his consciousness, a detail from a conversation weeks ago. Something James Reed had mentioned during a discussion about the European expansion. With Sarah's trust holding 50% of the company's shares, James had said casually, any major move requires a guardian's sign-off while she's a minor. As her stepmother, Catherine's signature should suffice for most purposes. At the time, Robert had corrected him. Catherine was not Sarah's legal guardian. Jennifer's sister in California held that role, though she had agreed to let Sarah live with Robert, given the child's medical needs, an established care team in Chicago. James had seemed oddly disappointed by this information. Now that reaction took on new significance. Robert reached for his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the number he needed. Despite the late hour, Jack Reynolds answered on the second ring. Blackwell, it's been ages. Don't tell me you're finally taking me up on that fishing trip. The gruff voice of his old college roommate, now a detective with Chicago PD's Special Victims Unit, was a welcome sound. Jack, Robert said quietly, aware that walls might have ears. I need your help. Something's wrong in my house, and I think my daughter is in danger. A beat of silence, then Jack's voice, all traces of casual banter gone. Tell me everything. As Robert began to explain what he'd witnessed and discovered, a soft noise from the doorway caught his attention. Sarah sat in her wheelchair, her small face pale in the office's dim light, Martha hovering anxiously behind her. I'm sorry, sir, Martha whispered. She insisted on seeing you. Said she couldn't sleep knowing. Knowing what, sweetheart? Robert asked, setting down the phone with a murmured promise to call Jack back. Sarah wheeled herself forward, her movements surprisingly strong for a child so recently traumatized. When she reached Robert, she extended a small, clenched fist and opened it. In her palm lay a crumpled piece of paper. She makes me take these, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Every day. They make me sleepy, and then she hurts me while I can't move. Robert carefully took the paper, unfolding it to reveal a small white pill with unfamiliar markings. Not one of Sarah's prescribed medications, which Robert knew by heart. When did this start, Sarah? He asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the rage building inside him. After you went to London, Sarah said. She said if I didn't take them, or if I told you, she would push me down the stairs. Her voice dropped even lower. She said no one would believe a broken little girl anyway. Robert gathered his daughter into his arms, lifting her from the wheelchair as if she weighed nothing. Against his chest, he could feel her heart racing like a trapped bird. I believe you, Sarah, he whispered fiercely, and I'm going to fix this, I promise. As he held his trembling daughter, Robert's mind raced through the implications of what he'd learned. Catherine wasn't just abusing Sarah. She was drugging her, possibly altering her medical care, and had threatened her life. And somehow, James Reed was involved, possibly targeting Sarah's trust fund and her shares in Blackwell Technologies. This wasn't just cruelty. This was a methodical, calculated plan. In that moment, cradling his daughter against the backdrop of a stormy Chicago night, Robert Blackwell made a decision. He had failed Jennifer once, allowing work to draw him away from the daughter they'd both adored. He would not fail again. Martha, he said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. Pack a bag for Sarah, essentials only. We're leaving within the hour. The housekeeper nodded, no questions asked. She had served the Blackwell family for nearly 3 decades. Her loyalty was to Robert and Sarah, not the woman who had infiltrated their lives. And sir, Martha said, pausing at the door, be careful. Mrs. Blackwell was on the phone earlier with Mr. Reed. I couldn't hear everything, but she said something about accelerating the timeline. Whatever they're planning, I don't think they intend to wait much longer. As Martha disappeared down the hallway, Robert set Sarah back in her wheelchair, kneeling to meet her eyes. Jennifer's eyes, blue as a summer sky, now clouded with fear, but also with a flicker of hope. Listen to me, Sarah, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I made a mistake leaving you alone with her. That will never happen again. From now on, we face everything together. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, her small chin lifting with a determination that reminded Robert painfully of Jennifer. Together, she whispered. From somewhere in the house came the sound of a door closing, followed by the distinct click of high heels on marble. Catherine had returned to the main floor. Robert rose to his full height, straightening his shoulders. The exhausted businessman who had arrived home hours earlier was gone. In his place stood a father preparing to wage war for his child's safety. Stay with Martha, Robert instructed Sarah, giving her small hand one final squeeze. I need to make a call, then we'll go. As Sarah wheeled herself back toward her room, Robert retrieved his phone and dialed Jack Reynolds again. This time his voice held no uncertainty, only cold determination. Jack, I need everything you can find on Catherine Pierce Blackwell and James Reed, and I need it fast. I think they're planning something, and Sarah may not be their only victim. Outside, lightning split the Chicago sky, illuminating the rain-soaked garden where Robert's world had shattered hours before. A storm was coming, in more ways than one, but this time Robert Blackwell would not be absent when it broke. This time he would stand as the last line of defense between his daughter and those who meant her harm. He had made a promise to Jennifer, to Sarah, and now to himself. And Robert Blackwell always kept his promises, no matter what it cost. Dawn broke reluctantly over Chicago, gray lights seeping through storm clouds that refused to yield. Robert Blackwell stood at the window of the safe house, watching the city awaken beneath him. The high-rise apartment in the Gold Coast district belonged to Jack Reynolds, or rather to one of Jack's carefully cultivated aliases. No connection to Robert. No paper trail for Catherine or James Reed to follow. Sarah slept in the bedroom down the hall, her small body finally relaxed after a night of nightmares. Each time she had cried out, Robert had been there, holding her hand, whispering reassurances until sleep reclaimed her. The dark circles under his eyes testified to his vigil, but exhaustion was a small price to pay. He would not fail her again. Robert's phone vibrated silently in his pocket. The screen showed a familiar number. Blackwell Technologies headquarters. "This is Blackwell. Sir, it's Henderson." His executive assistant's voice was tight with concern. "Mrs. Blackwell is here with Mr. Reed. They're saying you've had some kind of breakdown, that Sarah was admitted to Chicago Memorial last night, and you removed her against medical advice." Robert's grip tightened on the phone. The counterattack had begun sooner than expected. "Henderson, listen carefully. I am fine. Sarah is with me and safe. Whatever Catherine and Reed tell you, do not give them access to my files, my schedule, or my contacts. Understood?" A pause. "Yes, sir, and sir, security reported Mrs. Blackwell attempting to access your private server room at 2 a.m. I denied the request as per protocol, but thought you should know." "Thank you, Henderson. Stay vigilant." Robert ended the call, his mind racing. The server room contained backups of everything: financial records, research data, and most importantly, the trust documents for Sarah's inheritance. Whatever Catherine and James were planning, they were accelerating their timeline. A soft knock at the apartment door drew Robert's attention. Through the peephole, he recognized Jack Reynolds' weathered face. Robert disengaged the 3 locks and admitted his old friend. At 48, Jack carried his 20 years with Chicago PD in the lines etched into his face and the slight stoop of his shoulders. His brown hair was thinning, his frame less athletic than during their Northwestern days, but his eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. "You look like hell," Jack observed, setting his battered leather briefcase on the kitchen counter. "When did you last sleep?" "Sleep's overrated," Robert replied, pouring them both coffee from the pot he'd brewed hours earlier. "What did you find?" Jack opened his briefcase, extracting a manila folder. "Catherine Pierce Blackwell doesn't exist, at least not before about 10 years ago." He spread photographs and documents across the counter. "Her real name is Karen Prescott, born in Pittsburgh. Father was an alcoholic steelworker. Mother worked 3 restaurants. Karen disappeared at 17, right after her father's mysterious fall down the stairs resulted in his death." Robert studied the DMV photo of a younger Catherine, Karen, her features recognizable but harder, less polished. "And Reed?" "Not her cousin. Actual name is Jason Reynolds, no relation to yours truly. He's been working the same scam for years. Target wealthy individuals, preferably widowed or divorced, with substantial assets and young children. They've done this at least twice before." Jack pulled out 2 more photos. Middle-aged men, both successful-looking, both with haunted eyes. Richard Westlake, tech entrepreneur in Denver, lost his company, his reputation, and ultimately his life. Suicide 3 years ago. And Martin Chambers, banking executive in Seattle, currently in a psychiatric facility after a nervous breakdown. Both men married Karen Prescott. Both had young children from previous marriages. Both lost everything. The coffee turned bitter in Robert's mouth. "The children?" Jack's expression darkened. Westlake's son drowned in a swimming accident shortly before the father's suicide. Chambers' daughter survived but suffered unexplained injuries that left her partially paralyzed. He met Robert's gaze directly. "Sound familiar?" Cold fury washed through Robert. Not just opportunists then, predators, monsters who specifically targeted vulnerable families, who hurt children as a means to an end. "What's their end game?" Robert asked, voice dangerously quiet. "Near as we can tell, they isolate the child, abuse them to create dependency and fear, then either engineer an accident or have the child institutionalized for behavioral problems. With the child out of the way, they gain control of any trust funds or inheritance, drain the accounts, then disappear before anyone realizes what happened." Robert's hand tightened around his coffee mug. "Sarah's trust holds 50% of Blackwell Technologies. If something happened to her, as her father, I'd inherit her shares. And as your wife, Catherine would potentially have access." Jack's voice was grim. "They've refined their approach with you. Instead of going after your personal wealth, they're aiming for something bigger. Control of a multi-billion-dollar company." The magnitude of the threat crystallized in Robert's mind. This wasn't just about money. It was about his daughter's life. I need to get Sarah somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach her. Working on it, Jack assured him. But first, we need to meet someone. Olivia Chen, the nurse who texted you. She's waiting at that coffee shop across from Chicago Memorial. I can't leave Sarah alone. She won't be? Meet Detective Lisa Ramirez. Jack nodded toward the apartment door, which opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s with intelligent eyes and an athletic build concealed beneath a casual sweater and jeans. Lisa's with special victims. She'll stay with Sarah while we're gone. Robert hesitated, the promise to never leave Sarah warring with the need to gather evidence against Catherine. It's okay, Daddy. Sarah's small voice came from the hallway. She sat in her wheelchair, dressed in the clothes Martha had packed, her teddy bear clutched tightly against her chest. I'll be okay with Detective Lisa. You need to help the other kids too. Other kids. Even in her fear, Sarah thought of others who might be suffering as she had. Robert crossed to his daughter, kneeling before her wheelchair. How did I get so lucky to have the bravest daughter in the world? He asked softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Sarah's smile was fragile but real. Mom used to say I got it from you. Robert swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. I'll be back as soon as I can. Detective Ramirez has my number. Call if you need anything. Anything at all. Promise you'll come back? The question held echoes of too many broken promises. Too many times Robert had chosen work over being present. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Robert assured her, pressing a kiss to her forehead before rising to his full height. He turned to Lisa Ramirez, lowering his voice. No one comes in this apartment except Jack or me. Not building management, not delivery people, no one. If Catherine somehow finds this place, she won't get past me, Lisa said simply, her hand brushing the concealed weapon at her hip. Your daughter will be safe. With a final glance at Sarah, Robert followed Jack out of the apartment, the three locks engaging behind them with reassuring finality. The coffee shop across from Chicago Memorial was crowded with the morning rush of doctors, nurses, and visitors seeking caffeine before facing the day ahead. Robert and Jack found Olivia Chen in a corner booth, her petite frame nearly hidden behind a large cappuccino. At 29, the pediatric nurse looked younger than her years, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes alert and wary. Mr. Blackwell, she said as they slid into the booth, thank you for coming. I've been trying to reach you for weeks, but Mrs. Blackwell always intercepted my calls. Tell me everything, Robert said, dispensing with pleasantries. Olivia glanced around, then lowered her voice. I was on duty 3 times when Mrs. Blackwell brought Sarah in. Each time, Sarah had suspicious injuries, bruises, mild hypothermia, once a sprained wrist. Mrs. Blackwell always had explanations that seemed plausible on the surface, but she hesitated. Sarah's eyes told a different story. Why didn't you report your suspicions? Jack asked, his tone professional but not accusatory. I did, Olivia said, a hint of frustration coloring her voice. To Dr. Lewis Hamilton, the attending physician. He dismissed my concerns, said Mrs. Blackwell was from a prominent family and that rich kids had accidents too. The second time, he warned me about making unfounded allegations. The third time, he threatened to report me for creating a hostile work environment. Robert exchanged a glance with Jack. Dr. Hamilton, is he connected to Catherine or Reed? I don't know about personal connections, but after the third incident, I saw Mrs. Blackwell hand him an envelope in the parking garage. He put it in his coat without opening it. The pieces continued to fall into place. Catherine and James had built a network of enablers and accomplices, doctors who would look the other way, perhaps provide false documentation or prescribe unnecessary medications. Did you see what medications Sarah was receiving? Robert asked, remembering the pill his daughter had shown him. Olivia's expression darkened. That's the other thing. Dr. Hamilton prescribed haloperidol. It's an antipsychotic, normally used for severe behavioral disorders. Sarah showed no symptoms that would warrant such a powerful drug. She pulled a small notebook from her purse and slid it across the table. I kept records of everything I observed. Dates, BPAs, injuries, medications. I knew something was wrong, but without evidence, Robert took the notebook, this small chronicle of his daughter's suffering he should have prevented. This helps, Miss Chen, more than you know. Olivia's pager buzzed. She checked it with a grimace. I have to get back on shift. But Mr. Blackwell, her eyes met his directly. Whatever happens, don't let Sarah near Dr. Hamilton again. I don't trust him. As Olivia hurried back toward the hospital, Jack tucked the notebook into his briefcase. We're building a solid case, Robert. Child abuse, medical malpractice, conspiracy, attempted fraud. But we need to move carefully. If Catherine and Reed suspect we're gathering evidence, they'll disappear, Robert finished grimly. Or worse, they'll try to get to Sarah first. Jack nodded. Let's head back. I need to log these notes into evidence, and the insistent buzzing of Robert's phone interrupted them. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. Robert answered cautiously. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell, this is Martha Davis. The housekeeper's voice was tight with urgency. I'm at a gas station payphone. They took my cell. You need to know, Mrs. Blackwell fired me this morning, said I was conspiring with you against her. But before I left, I overheard her talking with Mr. Reed. They mentioned something about accelerating Phase 3 in the boat at Montrose Harbor tonight at midnight. Robert's blood ran cold. Montrose Harbor was on Lake Michigan's shoreline. A boat? An accident waiting to happen. Martha, are you safe? For now, but Mr. Blackwell, there's something else. They have your mother-in-law. The world seemed to tilt beneath Robert's feet. Eleanor? How? She's in California. She arrived last night. Apparently Mrs. Blackwell called her, said Sarah was asking for her grandmother. I saw her briefly this morning. She seemed confused, disoriented. Mr. Reed gave her some tea and she could barely stand afterward. Martha's voice broke. I think they're going to use her to draw you out. Robert's mind raced. Eleanor Jenkins was Jennifer's mother, Sarah's only living grandparent. After Jennifer's death, the elderly woman had moved to California to be near her sister, her health too fragile to take on raising Sarah, despite being named as a contingent guardian in Jennifer's will. Martha, can you get to the Hyatt on Wacker Drive? Ask for Jack Reynolds at the front desk. He'll make sure you're safe. I'll try. Be careful, Mr. Blackwell. They're desperate now. The call ended, leaving Robert staring at the phone, ice forming in his veins. They're making their move, he said to Jack. We need to get back to Sarah, now. The traffic seemed deliberately perverse. Red lights stretching into eternity. Cars crawling through Chicago's congested streets. Robert's fingers drummed against his knee, every delay an agony, every block an endless journey. His phone rang again. Lisa Ramirez. Detective, is Sarah? She's fine, Lisa assured him. But you need to see something on the news, Channel 8. Jack flipped on the car's built-in screen, tuning to the local station. Catherine's face filled the display, her expression a perfect mask of distress. Beside her stood James Reed, his arm protectively around her shoulders. My husband has been under tremendous strain, Catherine was saying, tears glistening artfully in her eyes. The pressures of running Blackwell Technologies, combined with the ongoing grief over his first wife's death. The doctors warned me he might have an episode like this. The reporter leaned forward, microphone extended. Mrs. Blackwell, are you saying your husband abducted your stepdaughter? Robert loves Sarah, Catherine said, her voice breaking precisely on cue. But he's not well. He's convinced himself that I'm hurting her somehow. The truth is, Sarah has been self-harming for months. The specialist diagnosed childhood depression, possibly even early-onset schizophrenia. Robert couldn't accept it. She pressed a delicate hand to her mouth as if overwhelmed. He took her from the hospital last night, against medical advice. I'm terrified for both of them. Reed stepped forward, all somber professionalism. We're working with the authorities to locate Robert and Sarah. Our only concern is their safety. If anyone has information about their whereabouts, please contact the police immediately. The camera panned to a distinguished-looking man in a white coat. The caption identified him as Dr. Lewis Hamilton, Chief of Pediatric Psychiatry at Chicago Memorial. Sarah Blackwell has been under my care for several months, Hamilton stated gravely. Her condition requires specialized treatment and medication. Without proper supervision, there is a risk of self-harm or worse. It is imperative that she be returned to medical care as soon as possible. Robert's hand clenched into a fist. That lying bastard. Sarah has never been under his care. I've never even met him. They're controlling the narrative, Jack said, his expression grim. Painting you as unstable, making it a mental health issue rather than abuse. Smart move means any allegations you make against Catherine will be dismissed as paranoid delusions. They're turning the whole city against me, Robert realized, watching pedestrians on the sidewalk glancing at smartphones, no doubt seeing the same broadcast. They're making it impossible for me to move freely with Sarah. Jack accelerated through a yellow light, his face set in determined lines. Then we need to change the game. We need proof they can't explain away or dismiss. How? It's their word against mine, and they've got doctors, hospital records. They've got lies, Jack interrupted. We need truth, hard evidence that proves Catherine and Reed are running a scam, something that ties them to Westlake and Chambers. Robert's mind raced through possibilities. The Blackwell Technologies servers, all my private records are backed up there, including video from the home security system. If we can retrieve the footage from last night, that's a start, but we need more. A paper trail, bank records, communications between them and their previous victims, something that establishes a pattern. As they neared the Gold Coast, Jack's phone buzzed. He answered on speaker. Reynolds. Detective, it's Ramirez. We've got trouble. Building security reports a woman matching Catherine Blackwell's description attempted to gain access to the apartment floor. She was turned away, but she had a court order with her, emergency custody of Sarah based on psychiatric concerns. Robert felt the blood drain from his face. How did they find the apartment? Unknown. But the good news, they didn't get in, and we're relocating now. I've got Sarah with me. We're taking the service elevator to the parking garage, black SUV tinted windows. We're 5 minutes out, Jack said. Stay on the line. Through the phone came the soft rumble of an elevator, then Sarah's frightened voice. Detective Ramirez, who are those men? Lisa's reply was sharp with sudden tension. Sarah, stay behind me. Sir, I need to see some identification. The sound of a scuffle came through the speaker, followed by a muffled thud and Sarah's terrified scream. Then silence. Ramirez! Jack barked into the phone. Lisa! No response. Sarah! Robert shouted, heart pounding. Sarah! The call ended. Jack slammed his foot on the accelerator. Sirens suddenly blaring as he wove through traffic. I'm calling for backup. Gold Coast garage, officer down, possible child abduction. Robert sat frozen, the world narrowing to a single devastating fact. They had taken Sarah. After all his promises, all his assurances that he would protect her, Catherine had found a way to take her. 4 agonizing minutes later, they screeched into the parking garage, joining 2 police cruisers already on scene. Lisa Ramirez sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, an EMT attending to a gash on her forehead. 2 men, she reported grimly as Jack and Robert approached. Professional. They knew I was armed and took countermeasures, hit me from behind while I was checking their IDs. They knew exactly who they were looking for and where to find us. Sarah? Robert asked, the single word containing all his fear. Lisa's eyes met his, filled with professional regret and human compassion. They took her, Mr. Blackwell. I'm sorry. Robert staggered, as if physically struck. Jack's hand on his shoulder was the only thing keeping him upright. Description of the men? Vehicle. Caucasian, mid-30s, athletic builds, dark suits, earpieces, like Secret Service or high-end private security. They left in a black Suburban, no plates. Lisa winced as the EMT applied antiseptic to her wound. This wasn't a random snatch. This was planned, coordinated. They knew exactly when and where we'd be moving her. Jack turned to Robert. Is there anyone else who knew about this apartment? Anyone who could have told Catherine? Robert's mind raced through the possibilities. Henderson at the office? No, his loyalty was absolute. Martha? She'd been fired before they relocated. Then a cold realization dawned. The pill, he said quietly. The one Sarah showed me last night. I put it in my pocket. And, Jack prompted, what if it wasn't just a sedative? What if it contained a tracker? Catherine was drugging Sarah daily. It would explain how they found us so quickly. Jack's expression darkened. Smart, evil, but smart. Give me the pill. Robert reached into his pocket and extracted the small white tablet, now partially crushed. Jack studied it, then wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief. I'll have the lab analyze it. In the meantime, we need to find Sarah before they move to Phase 3, whatever that is. Montrose Harbor, Robert said, his voice hardening with resolve. Midnight. That's where they're taking her. And my mother-in-law. Martha overheard them talking about a boat. An accident, Jack surmised grimly. Out on Lake Michigan, the grieving widow Catherine loses her mentally unstable husband and her troubled stepdaughter in one tragic night. The scenario played out in Robert's mind with horrifying clarity. A boat accident. 2 bodies, or perhaps none found. Just an empty vessel adrift. Catherine would inherit everything as Robert's widow. The perfect crime. We have, Robert checked his watch, 14 hours to find them and stop whatever they're planning. We need a warrant to search your house, access your servers, check Catherine's financials, Jack said, already moving toward his car. I'll call Judge Winters. He owes me a favor. No time, Robert countered. Catherine and Reed will have cleaned house already, but I know someone who can help us access the servers remotely. In the car, Robert dialed a number from memory. David Mills, answered a crisp voice. David, it's Robert Blackwell. I need your help. A pause. Sir, Mrs. Blackwell announced this morning that you're on medical leave. All inquiries are to go through her or Mr. Reed. Robert closed his eyes briefly. The takeover was already in progress. David, listen carefully. Catherine and Reed have kidnapped Sarah. They're planning to kill us both tonight. I need access to the security footage from our home and any communications between Catherine, Reed, and Dr. Lewis Hamilton. Another longer pause. That's a serious accusation, sir. It's the truth, David. You've known me for 15 years. Have I ever given you reason to doubt my word or my sanity? David's voice lowered. No, sir, but Mrs. Blackwell has filed for emergency conservatorship over your affairs, citing mental instability. She's meeting with the board at noon. Robert's grip tightened on the phone. David, I'm begging you. My daughter's life is at stake. Help me. The silence stretched, each second an eternity. Finally, David spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The server room security cameras have a blind spot near the eastern wall. The access panel there is rarely used. Password is Jennifer's birthday, followed by Sarah's. Relief washed through Robert. Thank you, David. I never had this conversation with you, sir. And Robert, be careful. Mrs. Blackwell has hired additional security. They're not just protecting, they're hunting. As the call ended, Robert turned to Jack. We need to get to Blackwell Technologies. I can access the system through a back door. It's too risky, Jack argued. Catherine will have security watching for you. Do you have a better idea? Every minute we waste is another minute Sarah is in their hands. Jack considered it for a moment, then nodded grimly. We go in quiet, no sirens, no backup that might tip them off. But Robert, he fixed his friend with a steady gaze. If they've hurt Sarah, you need to let me handle it. Legally, by the book. Promise me you won't do anything that gives them ammunition against you. Robert met his gaze, the struggle evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. I promise to try. It was the best he could offer, and both men knew it. The Blackwell Technologies headquarters rose 60 stories into the Chicago skyline, a gleaming monument to innovation and success. Robert had designed it himself, from the cutting-edge research labs on the top floors to the open, light-filled atrium that greeted visitors. Now it felt like enemy territory. Jack parked 3 blocks away, and they approached on foot, using service alleys to avoid main streets where Robert might be recognized. The private entrance Robert used as CEO would be watched, as would the main lobby. Maintenance entrance, Robert decided, leading Jack around to the loading dock at the rear of the building. The security is lighter and the guards know me. Indeed, the middle-aged security officer at the dock entrance straightened when he saw Robert approaching. Mr. Blackwell, I thought you were on medical leave. Hello, Frank. Just needed to pick up something from my office. You mind letting us in quietly? Frank hesitated, glancing between Robert and Jack. I don't know, sir. Mrs. Blackwell left strict instructions. Frank, Robert interrupted gently. Do you remember when your wife was in the hospital last year? How the company covered all the expenses that insurance wouldn't touch? Frank nodded slowly. You made that happen. Told HR to handle it personally. I did, because that's the kind of company we are. We take care of our people. Robert placed a hand on the guard's shoulder. I'm asking you to help me now, Frank. It's important. Frank studied Robert's face, then reached a decision. Loading Bay 3 is clear. Take the service elevator to the 35th floor. The cameras are down for maintenance in that sector. He pretended not to see as Robert and Jack slipped past. I never saw you, sir. Robert navigated the service corridors with practiced ease, avoiding the main thoroughfares where employees might recognize him. The service elevator deposited them on the 35th floor, research and development, largely automated and sparsely staffed on weekends. Server room is 2 floors up, Robert explained as they exited the elevator. We can take the emergency stairs. As they moved through the deserted R&D lab, a door opened ahead. Robert pulled Jack behind a row of equipment just as 2 men in dark suits emerged, speaking in low voices. Sweep this floor, then move up to the executive level, one was saying. Reed wants the building secure before the board meeting. You really think Blackwell would come here? That's suicide. Reed says he's desperate. Something about the daughter. Just keep your eyes open. The security team moved in the opposite direction, giving Robert and Jack the opportunity to slip toward the emergency stairs. They climbed 2 flights in silence, emerging into another empty corridor. "Security office is around the corner," Robert whispered. "They'll be monitoring the server room entrance." Jack considered the problem. Create a distraction, something to pull them away from their posts. Robert nodded, moving to a nearby fire alarm. "Ready?" At Jack's nod, Robert pulled the alarm. Immediately, claxons blared throughout the building, lights flashing in rhythmic pulses. Within seconds, doors began opening as employees responded to the apparent emergency. "Now," Robert said, leading Jack toward the server room as security personnel rushed past, coordinating evacuation procedures. The server room's main entrance would be locked down, but the eastern access panel David had mentioned was tucked behind a utility closet, out of sight of cameras. Robert punched in the code, Jennifer's birthday followed by Sarah's, and the panel slid open, revealing the climate-controlled heart of Blackwell Technologies. Rows of servers hummed, maintaining the digital lifeblood of the company. Robert moved to a workstation in the corner, logging in with his personal credentials. "We don't have much time," Jack warned, keeping watch at the access panel. "The fire department will verify it's a false alarm within minutes." Robert's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through security protocols he himself had designed. "I need to access the home system first. The security cameras should have captured what happened in the garden last night." The home security system appeared on screen, but instead of the expected file tree, a single message flashed. "Data corrupted, contact system administrator." They wiped it, Robert realized, frustration mounting. "They've deleted the evidence." "Try email communications," Jack suggested. "See if there's any correspondence between Catherine and Hamilton." Robert shifted focus, pulling up Catherine's email account. Again, all messages had been scrubbed clean, the trash emptied. "She's covering her tracks," Robert muttered, "but she can't have erased everything." He navigated to the company's financial records, searching for any unusual transactions. There, a series of consultancy payments to Hamilton Medical Group, beginning 6 months ago. Small enough to avoid scrutiny individually, but totaling over $200,000. "Print that," Jack instructed. "It establishes a financial connection between Blackwell Technologies and Hamilton." Robert sent the records to a printer in the corner, then continued searching. A new idea struck him, Jennifer's old email account. He'd never had the heart to delete it after her death. The account opened, revealing years of correspondence between Jennifer and her mother, friends, colleagues. Robert sorted by recent activity, expecting nothing, and froze. "Jack," he called softly, "look at this." Jack joined him at the screen, where an email thread appeared. Messages exchanged between Jennifer's account and Eleanor Jenkins, dated within the past month. "That's impossible," Robert breathed. "Jennifer's been dead for 2 years." The messages were brief, seemingly innocent. Requests for Eleanor to visit, mentions of Sarah's declining health, concerns about Robert's increasing instability. Catherine, Robert realized, she hacked Jennifer's account to manipulate Eleanor into coming to Chicago, to use her as bait. Jack studied the screen. "Can you trace the login location?" Robert ran a quick search. "The home office IP address. Catherine's been accessing Jennifer's email from our house." The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. Catherine had been planning this for months, isolating Sarah, documenting a false medical history, manipulating Eleanor, creating a paper trail that painted Robert as unstable. And now, with Sarah in their custody and Eleanor as leverage, they were moving toward the endgame. "We need more," Jack said grimly. "This establishes motive and premeditation, but not the connection to their previous victims." Robert thought for a moment, then navigated to the company's cloud storage, the repository for all his personal files, including financial records. Accessing a hidden directory, he pulled up the background check he'd run on Catherine before their marriage. "Here," he said, pointing to the screen. The investigator noted unusual gaps in Catherine's history. "I didn't think much of it at the time, assumed she was just reinventing herself after leaving a small town. But look at these dates." The gaps in Catherine's history aligned perfectly with the periods when Karen Prescott had been married to Richard Westlake and Martin Chambers. "That's the connection," Jack said. "With this and Olivia's notes, we have enough for a warrant." A commotion outside the server room interrupted them, voices approaching, security badges beeping as doors were unlocked. "Time's up," Jack warned. "Grab what you can and let's move." Robert downloaded the critical files to a thumb drive and grabbed the printed financial records. They slipped back through the eastern access panel just as the main door to the server room opened, revealing James Reed flanked by two security guards. "Check everything," Reed was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "Blackwell's desperate. If he accesses any files, I want to know exactly what he saw." Robert and Jack retreated down the emergency stairs, the thumb drive clutched tightly in Robert's hand. This was evidence, proof of Catherine and Reed's conspiracy, but it wasn't enough to find Sarah. As they emerged into the R&D lab, Robert's phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Blackwell." "Hello, Robert." Catherine's voice, smooth as silk and cold as ice. "Missing something?" Robert's hand tightened around the phone. "If you've heard her, Sarah is fine, for now. She's been asking for her grandmother. They're having quite the reunion on our boat." "What do you want, Catherine?" A soft laugh. "You know exactly what I want, Robert. Everything. Blackwell Technologies, the trust fund, your life insurance. It was supposed to be a gradual transition. Sarah institutionalized, you devastated, and eventually suicidal. Me, the grieving widow, picking up the pieces. But you had to complicate things." "Let them go," Robert said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Take whatever you want from me, but let Sarah and Eleanor go." "That's not how this works. You have something I need first. The thumb drive you just stole from the server room. Yes, I know exactly where you are. Did you think security doesn't alert me when the CEO's credentials are used?" Robert exchanged a glance with Jack, who was already texting rapidly on his own phone, presumably calling for backup. "Come alone to Montrose Harbor," Catherine continued. "Pier D, slip 42, midnight, bring the thumb drive and any other evidence you've collected. Then we'll discuss terms for Sarah and Eleanor's release." "I want proof they're alive," Robert demanded. A pause, then Sarah's frightened voice came through the speaker. "Daddy, I'm scared. They gave Grandma something and she's not waking up." The call ended abruptly, leaving Robert staring at the phone, rage and fear warring within him. "She's alive," Jack said, gripping Robert's shoulder. "That's what matters. We'll get her back." "They want me to come alone," Robert said. "If I bring police, they'll kill Sarah and Eleanor. And if you go alone, they'll kill all three of you," Jack countered. "This ends tonight, one way or another. But we do it smart." Robert nodded, though the promise he'd made to Jennifer echoed in his mind. "Promise me you'll protect her, no matter what, even if it meant sacrificing himself." "All right," he agreed. "We do it smart, but Jack," he met his friend's gaze directly, "I meant what I said to Catherine. If it comes down to a choice between evidence that puts them away and saving Sarah, I choose Sarah, every time." Jack studied him, then nodded slowly. "I know you do. That's why we're going to make sure it doesn't come to that." As they slipped out of the building through the same loading dock entrance, Robert felt the weight of the next few hours pressing down on him. Somewhere in Chicago, Sarah was afraid, waiting for her father to save her. And despite all his wealth, all his power, all he could offer was a desperate plan and a father's promise. It would have to be enough. The sun began its descent over Chicago's western horizon, casting long shadows across the city. In less than 6 hours, Robert would face Catherine and Reed on that boat in Montrose Harbor. Either he would save his daughter, or he would die trying. There was no third option. There never had been. Darkness descended on Chicago like a shroud, bringing with it a fog that crept in from Lake Michigan, wrapping the city's towers in ghostly tendrils. Robert Blackwell sat in Jack Reynolds' unmarked police car 2 blocks from Montrose Harbor, watching the minute hand on his Patek Philippe inch closer to midnight. Each passing second was another heartbeat Sarah endured in Catherine's clutches. "Run it by me again," Jack said, checking his service weapon before sliding it back into his shoulder holster. Every step, Robert's gaze remained fixed on the harbor entrance, where occasional headlights pierced the gathering fog. "I approach Pier D alone, thumb drive visible. You and your team stay back until I confirm Sarah and Eleanor are on the boat and alive. Once I have visual confirmation, I signal by removing my watch. You move in only after I'm on board." Jack nodded grimly. "My people are already in position, plain clothes scattered throughout the harbor. SWAT's on standby 3 minutes out. Coast Guard has a boat ready to intercept if they try to make a run for open water. And if they threaten Sarah or Eleanor, we hold position until they're secure." Jack's voice carried the weight of 20 years of similar operations, some successful, some not. "Robert, you need to understand, once you're on that boat, you're on your own for at least 90 seconds. A lot can happen in 90 seconds. Robert knew this all too well. In 90 seconds, a life could end. A family could be destroyed. A child could become an orphan. I can handle 90 seconds, he said, checking his own weapon. A 9mm Glock Jack had provided, now securely holstered at the small of his back. A last resort Robert prayed he wouldn't need. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Time's up. Pier D now. Come alone, or they die. Robert exhaled slowly, centering himself as Jennifer had taught him years ago during Lamaze classes before Sarah's birth. Focus on your breath. Stay present. Fear is natural, but don't let it control you. That's my cue. He opened the car door, the cold night air rushing in to greet him. Jack caught his arm. Remember your training. Don't be a hero. Your job is to keep them talking and verify Sarah and Eleanor are okay. That's it. We do the rest. Robert nodded, the weight of the Glock a constant reminder against his back. 90 seconds. The walk to Pier D felt like a march to execution, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation 2 years in the making, though he hadn't known it until yesterday. The wooden planks of the pier creaked beneath his feet, the sound amplified in the misty silence. Boats rocked gently in their slips, dark and unoccupied at this midnight hour. All except one. At the end of Pier D, slip 42, a sleek 50-foot yacht gleamed dully in the limited light, its polished hull reflecting the few lamps that remained lit along the harbor. The Lady Luck was emblazoned across the stern in elegant script. Robert recognized it immediately. The boat he'd purchased last summer at Catherine's insistence. A boat he'd boarded exactly twice, both times for corporate events Catherine had organized. A silhouette appeared on deck. Tall, male, unmistakably James Reed. That's far enough, Blackwell. Show me your hands. Robert stopped 20 feet from the yacht, raising his hands to shoulder height, the thumb drive clearly visible between his fingers. Where's my daughter? All in good time. Reed gestured with what appeared to be a pistol. First, toss over the drive. Not until I see Sarah and Eleanor. Reed's laugh was cold, amplified by the water's acoustic properties. You're not in a position to negotiate, Blackwell. Actually, I am. Robert lowered his hand slowly. This drive contains everything. Financial transfers to Hamilton, emails from Jennifer's hacked account, gaps in Catherine's history that align perfectly with her marriages to Westlake and Chambers. I have copies, of course. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. A tense silence followed, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the pier. Then a second figure emerged on deck. Catherine, elegant even at midnight, her blonde hair luminous in the darkness. He's bluffing, she called to Reed. He wouldn't risk Sarah. Am I? Robert countered. Sure. His voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. You've spent a year in my house, Catherine. You should know by now I always have contingencies. Now show me my daughter and mother-in-law, or I walk away and destroy everything you've worked for. Catherine studied him from the deck, her expression unreadable in the shadows. Finally, she nodded to Reed, who disappeared below deck. Moments later, he returned, pushing Sarah's wheelchair with one hand, his other arm supporting a disoriented Eleanor Jenkins. Robert's heart contracted at the sight of his daughter, her small form slumped in the wheelchair, head lolling to one side. Eleanor appeared barely conscious, her silver-streaked hair disheveled, her normally alert eyes unfocused. What did you do to them? Robert demanded, taking an involuntary step forward. Just a sedative, Catherine replied smoothly. They'll wake with nothing worse than a headache, assuming we conclude our business satisfactorily. Robert forced himself to remain calm, to stick to the plan. I want to speak to Sarah. She's sleeping. Wake her. Catherine's irritation flashed visible, even in the dim light. She moved to Sarah's side, shaking the child none too gently. Wake up, Sarah. Your father wants to play hero. Sarah stirred, lifting her head with obvious effort. Daddy? Her voice was slurred, frightened. I'm here, sweetheart, Robert called, fighting to keep his voice steady. Everything's going to be okay, I promise. Sarah attempted to focus on him, her small hand reaching out before dropping back to the armrest, too weak to sustain the effort. Verification complete. Sarah and Eleanor were alive, if drugged. Robert removed his watch, setting it deliberately on the pier railing, the signal to Jack's team. 90 seconds. The countdown began. Satisfied? Catherine asked coldly. Now the drive. Toss it over. Robert extracted the thumb drive from his pocket, holding it up so it caught the light. First, let's discuss terms. I give you this, and you let Sarah and Eleanor go. You and Reed take the boat and whatever cash you can carry. You have accounts in the Caymans, I assume. Use them. Disappear. I won't come after you. Reed snorted. You expect us to believe that? I expect you to recognize a good deal when you hear one, Robert replied. You've played this game before. Westlake, Chambers. You got away clean. Take the win and walk away. Catherine moved to the yacht's edge, her features becoming clearer as she stepped into the light of a nearby lamp. The beauty that had once captivated Robert now seemed hollow, a mask concealing something monstrous. You know we can't do that, she said softly. There's too much at stake now. Blackwell Technologies, the trust fund. We're talking billions, not millions, worth the extra risk. And my daughter's life? What's that worth? Catherine's smile was devoid of warmth. Nothing personal, Robert. Sarah was just an obstacle, like Jennifer. The casual cruelty of the statement hit Robert like a physical blow. What do you mean, like Jennifer? Oh, come now, Catherine purred. Surely you've wondered, all those treatments, all those specialists, and still the cancer progressed so quickly? Jennifer was young, healthy otherwise. Such a tragedy. Robert's blood turned to ice. You knew Jennifer? Catherine's laugh was soft and venomous. Knew her? I studied her. Every habit, every preference, every detail of her life. How else could I become the perfect replacement? So devoted to Sarah, so understanding of your grief, so eager to help you move forward. You were Jennifer's nurse, Robert realized, the memories flooding back. The quiet one with dark hair, always in the background. That's why I never recognized you. Amazing what platinum hair color, colored contacts, and a few strategic cosmetic procedures can do, Catherine confirmed, running one hand through her blonde tresses. Not that you would have noticed anyway. You barely looked at the nursing staff, too busy with your empire, too busy with your grief. The implications sent Robert reeling. Jennifer's cancer wasn't a coincidence. Let's just say certain experimental treatments can accelerate rather than cure when administered incorrectly, especially when the attending nurse ensures the mistakes are never documented. The revelation struck Robert with physical force. Catherine hadn't just targeted him after Jennifer's death. She had caused Jennifer's death, engineering the very vulnerability she later exploited. You murdered my wife to get to my money. The words felt torn from Robert's throat. Business, Catherine corrected coldly. Nothing personal. Jennifer was simply phase one. Rage surged through Robert, a white-hot current that threatened to consume all rational thought. His hand twitched toward the Glock at his back, every instinct screaming for justice, for vengeance. 70 seconds left, not yet. And Sarah, he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady, was hurting a 7-year-old child just business too? Necessary conditioning, Reed interjected, his tone clinically detached. The child needed to be compromised, physically, emotionally, psychologically. Makes the eventual accident or suicide more believable. You're monsters, Robert breathed, genuine horror washing through him. Both of you. We're survivors, Catherine countered. We take what we need from a world that gives nothing freely. Now the drive, Robert. Final warning. Robert glanced at his watch, gone from his wrist, now sitting on the railing. 60 seconds until Jack's team moved in. Come aboard and give it to me personally, Catherine demanded, her patience visibly thinning. No more delays. Robert hesitated, weighing the risks. Boarding the yacht would put him directly in their power, but it would also put him closer to Sarah and Eleanor. If things went wrong, he could at least try to protect them. Fine, he conceded, moving toward the gangplank, but Sarah and Eleanor leave the boat first. After we verify the drive contains what you claim, Reed countered, pistol still trained on Robert as he boarded. The deck rolled gently beneath Robert's feet as he stepped onto the yacht. The familiar smell of polished wood and salt air filled his nostrils, now tainted with the knowledge of what Catherine and Reed had planned to occur on these waters tonight. The drive, Catherine demanded, extending one manicured hand. 45 seconds. Robert reached into his pocket and produced the thumb drive. Verification first. It contains everything I said, financial records, emails, background checks. Reed took the drive, moving to a laptop set up on a small table near the stern. As he inserted it, Catherine maintained her position between Robert and the wheelchair where Sarah slumped, Eleanor motionless beside her. She looks like Jennifer, Catherine observed, glancing at Sarah with cold detachment. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. It would have been kinder to let her die in the accident with her mother. The casual cruelty sent a fresh wave of rage through Robert. You arranged the accident too, didn't you? The one that paralyzed Sarah? Catherine's smile was answer enough. Unfortunate that it wasn't completely successful, but we adapt. Plans change. 30 seconds. Reed looked up from the laptop, his expression darkening. It's encrypted. I can't access the files. Catherine's eyes narrowed. The password, Robert. Now. Release Sarah and Eleanor first, Robert countered. Then you get the password. A dangerous smile curved Catherine's lips. Always the negotiator. Fine. She nodded to Reed, who moved to wheel Sarah toward the gangplank. The girl first, as a show of good faith. Reed pushed Sarah's wheelchair forward, positioning her at the top of the gangplank. Robert tensed, preparing to grab her the moment she was within reach. 15 seconds. The password, Catherine reminded him, one hand resting almost casually on Eleanor's shoulder. Or the old woman goes over the side. Robert glanced at his mother-in-law, her eyes now fluttering as the sedative began to wear off. Jennifer's birthday, followed by the date we met, he lied, buying time. 081-5189. Reed turned back to the laptop, typing rapidly. Nothing, it's not working. 10 seconds. Catherine's expression hardened. Last chance, Robert. 5 seconds. Now, Robert shouted, lunging forward to grab Sarah's wheelchair, just as flashlights blazed from all directions, illuminating the yacht in harsh white light. Police! Freeze! Jack's voice boomed from a megaphone somewhere on the pier. Hands where we can see them. Chaos erupted on the deck. Reed swore, raising his pistol toward Robert. Without hesitation, Robert drew the Glock from his back and fired twice. Reed staggered backward, blood blooming on his chest, his expression one of shock rather than pain. Catherine screamed, not in fear but in rage. She grabbed Eleanor, using the older woman as a shield, as she backed toward the yacht's controls. Stay back, she shouted, producing a blade that gleamed in the spotlight's glare. I'll kill her. Robert positioned himself in front of Sarah's wheelchair, gun trained on Catherine. It's over, Catherine. There's nowhere to go. There's always somewhere to go, Catherine snarled, her mask of sophistication completely gone, replaced by feral determination. I survived the Pittsburgh slums. I survived my father's beatings. I'll survive this too. SWAT officers swarmed the pier, weapons trained on the yacht. Jack's voice came again through the megaphone. Release the hostage, Mrs. Blackwell. You're surrounded. Catherine's laugh was wild, unhinged. You think I care? You think prison scares me? She pressed the blade against Eleanor's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. I'll take what's mine first. Eleanor's eyes had fully opened now, clarity returning as the sedative wore off. Though frail at 72, Jennifer's mother possessed the same core of steel that had defined her daughter. Her gaze locked with Robert's for a split second, a silent understanding passing between them. With sudden, unexpected strength, Eleanor jabbed her elbow sharply into Catherine's ribs. The momentary distraction was all Robert needed. He fired once, the bullet striking Catherine's shoulder. She cried out, the knife clattering to the deck as she stumbled backward. You bitch! Catherine hissed at Eleanor, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Just like your daughter. Always in the way. Eleanor stood straighter despite her age, chin lifted in defiance. My daughter was worth 10 of you, and you'll never hurt her family again. Robert's aim remained steady, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Let her go, Catherine. Whatever happens next, Sarah and Eleanor walk away from this. That's non-negotiable. Always so righteous, Catherine spat, so concerned with doing the right thing. That's why you'll always lose to people like me. We're willing to do what needs to be done. With that, she shoved Eleanor violently toward Robert, simultaneously lunging for the yacht's controls. The sudden movement caused Robert to stumble as he caught Eleanor's weight, his shot going wide. The yacht's engines roared to life, the vessel lurching forward against its moorings. Catherine spun the wheel hard, snapping the lines that held the boat in its slip. The Lady Luck began to pull away from the pier, gathering speed. She's running, Jack shouted from the pier. Coast Guard, move in. Robert helped Eleanor to a seat, ensuring she was secure before turning to Sarah. The child's eyes were more alert now, the sedative wearing off. Daddy? She whispered, fear evident in her voice. It's okay, sweetheart, Robert assured her, kneeling beside her wheelchair. You're safe now. A commotion at the stern drew his attention. Catherine had climbed onto the rail, preparing to jump into a small, inflatable dinghy that trailed behind the yacht. Don't move, Robert called, raising his gun once more. It's finished, Catherine. She turned, her beauty terrible in the harsh light, her eyes wild with hatred. Nothing's finished until I say it is. I made you, Robert Blackwell. I orchestrated every moment of your life for the past 3 years. Jennifer's illness, Sarah's accident, your grief, your loneliness, your desperate need for someone to help you put the pieces back together. And now I'm putting them back together myself, Robert replied steadily. Without you. Catherine's smile was a knife's edge. We'll see. With that, she leapt from the rail toward the dinghy. She never reached it. A shot rang out, not from Robert's gun, but from the Coast Guard vessel that had pulled alongside. Catherine's body jerked in midair, then plummeted into the dark waters of Lake Michigan. Silence descended on the yacht, broken only by the gentle idling of the engines and Sarah's soft crying. Robert holstered his weapon and gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her as he hadn't in far too long. I've got you, he whispered against her hair. I've got you now. Jack boarded moments later with a team of officers, securing the scene with professional efficiency. Reed's dead, he reported quietly to Robert. Catherine's in the water. Coast Guard's retrieving her now, but it doesn't look good. Robert nodded, feeling nothing at the news, neither satisfaction nor regret. His focus remained entirely on the child in his arms and the elderly woman now being attended to by paramedics. We'll need statements, Jack continued, but that can wait until tomorrow. Get Sarah and Eleanor to the hospital. Get them checked out. Thank you, Jack, Robert said, the simple words inadequate for the depth of his gratitude. For everything. Jack squeezed his shoulder once, then turned to coordinate with his team, giving Robert a moment of privacy with his family. Eleanor was more alert now, though clearly disoriented. She reached for Robert's hand, her eyes filled with confusion and the beginning awareness of what had transpired. Robert, what happened? Where's Jennifer? The innocent question pierced Robert's heart. Jennifer's gone, Eleanor, remember? But Sarah's here. We're both here. Understanding dawned slowly in the older woman's eyes, followed by tears. I remember now. Catherine called me, said Sarah needed me. I came as quickly as I could, and then nothing. Just darkness. It's over now, Robert assured her. You're safe. Sarah stirred in his arms, her face lifting to study his. Did the bad lady hurt Grandma? No, sweetheart. Grandma's just a little confused. She'll be fine. And the bad lady? Robert exchanged a glance with Jack, who shook his head slightly. The bad lady is gone, Sarah. She can't hurt you or anyone else ever again. Sarah processed this, her expression far too serious for a 7-year-old. Did you keep your promise, Daddy? The one you made to Mommy? The question brought tears to Robert's eyes. Somehow his daughter had known about that private moment in the hospital room, that sacred vow between husband and wife. I tried, Sarah. I'm still trying. You came back for me, she said simply. That's what matters. In that moment, surrounded by police and paramedics, on a yacht that had been intended as the scene of their deaths, Robert Blackwell understood what Jennifer had always known. True protection wasn't about preventing pain or hardship. It was about being present through it all, standing firm when the storms came. It was about keeping promises, no matter the cost. Dude. The next morning dawned cold but clear, sunlight glinting off the windows of Chicago Memorial Hospital. Robert sat beside Sarah's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest as she slept peacefully for the first time in months. The doctors had assured him that she would recover fully from the sedatives Catherine had administered, a cocktail of benzodiazepines mixed with a novel GPS-enabled nanoparticle. Dr. Lewis Hamilton, the corrupt physician who had facilitated Catherine's abuse of Sarah, had been arrested at his home just after dawn. When confronted with evidence of his involvement, including financial records showing payments from Blackwell Technologies that Robert had never authorized, Hamilton had broken down, confessing everything. Mr. Blackwell? Robert looked up to find Dr. Sophia Chen standing in the doorway. Unlike her younger sister Olivia, the pediatric nurse who had first alerted Robert to Sarah's plight, Sophia specialized in neurological rehabilitation. At 45, she carried herself with quiet authority, her dark eyes compassionate but direct. Dr. Chen, Robert acknowledged, rising to shake her hand. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Of course. She moved to Sarah's bedside, reviewing the chart before turning back to Robert. I've gone over Sarah's medical records, the real ones, not the falsified documents Dr. Hamilton created. And I've examined the medications she's been receiving. And? Robert felt his chest tighten with apprehension. Sophia's expression softened slightly. I believe Sarah's condition may have been deliberately mismanaged. The paralysis resulting from her spinal injury was serious, yes, but potentially recoverable with proper treatment. Instead, she received medications that inhibited nerve regeneration and muscle recovery. Robert's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You're saying they weren't just abusing her. They were keeping her disabled. Deliberately. It appears so, Sophia confirmed. A wheelchair-bound child is more vulnerable, more dependent, easier to control, and she hesitated. And more likely to have an accident, Robert finished grimly. What's the prognosis now? With the right therapy and medication, there's a real possibility of partial recovery. Perhaps even substantial recovery, given her age and overall health. Sophia leaned forward, her voice lowered. Mr. Blackwell, I won't sugarcoat this. It will be a long and difficult process. There will be setbacks, pain, and moments of profound frustration. But Sarah is young and, from what Olivia has told me, exceptionally determined. Robert glanced at his sleeping daughter, this small being who had endured so much, yet somehow retained her essential spark. Whatever it takes, he said simply, whatever she needs. Sophia nodded, understanding the depth of commitment behind those simple words. We'll start as soon as she's fully recovered from the sedatives. I've already scheduled the first assessment for tomorrow morning. After Sophia left, Robert returned to his vigil at Sarah's bedside. Eleanor had been admitted overnight for observation, but according to the nurses, was recovering well and asking frequently about her granddaughter. Martha Davis, the loyal housekeeper who had risked her job and potentially her life to help save Sarah, was keeping Eleanor company. Jack Reynolds entered the room quietly, bearing 2 cups of hospital cafeteria coffee. He handed one to Robert before taking the chair opposite. Hamilton's singing like a canary, Jack informed him, keeping his voice low. Turns out Catherine had leverage on him, something about prescription fraud from his residency days. She used that to get him to falsify Sarah's records, prescribe inappropriate medications, and look the other way when she brought Sarah in with suspicious injuries. Robert took a sip of the bitter coffee, welcoming the jolt of caffeine after the sleepless night. What about the others? We're building cases against the whole network, Jack assured him, including a Judge William Carson who was apparently on Reed's payroll, ready to grant Catherine emergency conservatorship over your affairs if needed. And Catherine? Robert asked, though he already knew the answer from Jack's expression. Dead on arrival at the hospital. Bullets severed her carotid artery. She never had a chance. Jack studied Robert's face. How do you feel about that? Robert considered the question, searching his soul for the truth. Relieved, he admitted finally. Not happy, not vindicated, just relieved that she can't hurt Sarah or anyone else again. Jack nodded, understanding. The Coast Guard officer who fired the shot has been placed on administrative leave, standard procedure. But preliminary review indicates it was a justified use of force. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 old friends brought together again by crisis, now watching over the sleeping child who had survived the worst kind of betrayal. We found something else during the search of your house, Jack said eventually, reaching into his jacket pocket. I thought you might want this back sooner rather than later. He handed Robert a small USB drive, not the decoy Robert had given Catherine on the yacht, but a different one, silver rather than black. Where did you find this? Robert asked, turning the drive over in his palm. Hidden compartment in Catherine's jewelry box. Appears to contain video files from your home security system. The ones she claimed were corrupted, including footage from the night you caught her abusing Sarah in the garden. Robert closed his fingers around the drive. Evidence, proof. Not that it mattered for prosecuting Catherine anymore, but perhaps it would help build cases against her enablers. More importantly, it validated Sarah's experience, confirmed what she had endured was real and not imagined. There's something else, Jack continued, his tone shifting slightly. We found documents in Reed's office, plans, going back nearly 4 years. Before Jennifer's diagnosis, Robert realized, his stomach clenching. Jack nodded grimly. This wasn't an opportunistic scheme that happened after your wife died, Robert. Catherine, or Karen Prescott, as she was then, deliberately targeted your family. She researched you, researched Jennifer, got herself hired at the hospital specifically to get close to you. Why us? Robert asked, the question that had haunted him since the revelations on the yacht. Out of all the wealthy families in Chicago, why target mine? From what we can piece together from Reed's files, it was Jennifer's family connections that first caught their attention. The Jenkins family trust, though modest compared to your wealth, had provisions that made it an attractive target. But once Catherine realized the scale of Blackwell Technologies, Jack shrugged. They adjusted their plan, aiming higher. Sarah stirred in her sleep, a small furrow appearing between her brows. Robert reached out, gently smoothing her hair until the furrow disappeared and her breathing steadied again. "We'll need to keep the media contained," Robert said, thinking aloud. "This can't become a circus." Sarah's been through enough without becoming a tabloid story. "Already handled," Jack assured him. "My captain's issued a statement classifying this as an ongoing investigation involving a minor." Most outlets are respecting that for now, but eventually, Robert, there will be questions. This is too big to stay buried forever. "I know, but by then, hopefully, Sarah will be stronger. We'll be stronger." Jack rose, setting his empty coffee cup aside. "I should get back to the station. There's a mountain of paperwork waiting, and I want to personally supervise Hamilton's questioning." "Jack," Robert said, as his friend reached the door, "I don't know how to thank you." Jack turned back, his weathered face softening. "You already did. 25 years ago, sophomore year, when you found me passed out drunk on the quad after my father died. You got me to the health center, made sure I didn't choke on my own vomit, then badgered me into joining that study group that saved my GPA. He smiled faintly. "I told you then I'd return the favor someday." After Jack left, Robert sat in the quiet hospital room, listening to the gentle beep of monitors and Sarah's soft breathing. Outside the window, Chicago continued its relentless pace. Traffic flowing, people hurrying to meetings, construction cranes swinging through the sky. Life moving forward despite the fact that his had been forever changed. The door opened again and Eleanor Jenkins entered, walking with the assistance of a nurse. Though still pale, she looked remarkably composed for a woman who had been drugged, kidnapped, and held at knife point within the past 24 hours. Jennifer's mother had always possessed a core of resilience that her gentle demeanor belied. "How is she?" Eleanor asked, taking the chair Jack had vacated. "Sleeping peacefully," Robert answered. "The doctors say the sedatives should be completely out of her system by this afternoon." Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on her granddaughter's face. She looked so much like Jennifer at that age. The same determined little chin. "She has Jennifer's spirit too," Robert said softly. "Her courage." Eleanor reached across the bed, placing her hand over Robert's. "Jennifer would be proud of you. You kept your promise to her." "Not well enough," Robert countered, the guilt that had haunted him for months rising again. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected Sarah from the beginning." "You did protect her, Robert, when it mattered most." Eleanor's grip tightened on his hand. "We can't shield those we love from every pain, every danger. But we can be there when they need us most. You were there." The simple absolution in her words eased something in Robert's chest. Not eliminating his guilt, but perhaps making it bearable. They sat together in companionable silence, two people united by their love for the sleeping child between them. Eventually, Eleanor spoke again. "I've been thinking, Robert. My lease in California ends next month. I was wondering if perhaps—" She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "If perhaps you might consider moving back to Chicago?" Robert finished for her. "I was hoping you would. The guest house on the new property has an elevator and a garden view, and I think Sarah would benefit enormously from having you nearby." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that very much." As they discussed practical details, the logistics of moving, the timeline for settling affairs in California, Sarah's eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then recognition dawned as she focused on Robert. "Daddy, are we safe now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Robert assured her, reaching for her hand. "We're safe. And look who's here." Sarah turned her head, her face lighting up at the sight of her grandmother. "Grandma Eleanor, you remember me?" Eleanor laughed softly, leaning forward to kiss Sarah's forehead. "Of course I remember you, my darling girl. I was just a little confused for a while, that's all." As Sarah and Eleanor talked, Robert stepped into the hallway to give them a moment alone. He leaned against the wall, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the past 48 hours. The adrenaline that had kept him going was finally wearing off, leaving him bone-weary but clear-headed than he'd been in months. His phone buzzed with a text from Henderson, his executive assistant. "Board meeting postponed as requested. David Mills handling day-to-day operations. Take all the time you need, sir." Robert sent a brief note of thanks, then silenced his phone. Blackwell Technologies would survive without him for a while. Right now, his priority was in that hospital room and would remain so for the foreseeable future. Then, 3 months later, Robert stood at the edge of a grassy slope in Lincoln Park, watching Sarah navigate her wheelchair down a gentle path. Spring had transformed Chicago, clothing the city in vibrant green and bursts of colorful blooms. The sun warmed his face as he followed at a discreet distance, giving his daughter the independence she craved while remaining close enough to help if needed. The investigation into Catherine Pierce, or Karen Prescott, as she'd been born, had uncovered a trail of deception far more extensive than even Jack had anticipated. 3 previous victims before Westlake and Chambers, multiple identities, offshore accounts containing millions in stolen funds. Reed's background had been equally disturbing. A disbarred attorney with ties to organized crime, he had specialized in elder abuse and inheritance fraud before partnering with Catherine for more elaborate schemes. The evidence Robert had gathered that night, combined with Martha's testimony and records from Olivia Chen, had been enough to ensure that justice was served, even posthumously. Dr. Hamilton now faced a lengthy prison sentence, along with Judge Carson and several other accomplices in the conspiracy. But justice, Robert had discovered, was cold comfort compared to healing. Ahead, Sarah reached the small garden where they'd scattered Jennifer's ashes 2 years earlier. She positioned her wheelchair beside the memorial bench, carefully arranging the fresh daisies she'd brought, Jennifer's favorite flowers. Robert approached slowly, giving Sarah the moment she needed. When he finally sat beside her, she leaned against his arm, a gesture of trust that meant more than words. "Do you think Mom can see us?" she asked, her voice stronger now, free from the fear that had shadowed it for so long. "I do," Robert replied simply. "I think she's been watching over us all along." Sarah nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Dr. Sophia says I might be able to try the parallel bars next week. For real this time, not just holding on." There. Dr. Sophia Chen's initial assessment had confirmed her suspicions. Sarah's paralysis, while serious, had been deliberately worsened by improper therapy and medication. With proper treatment, there was hope for partial recovery. "That's wonderful news," Robert said, genuine pride warming his voice. "You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. Braver than me, that's for sure." Sarah considered this assessment with characteristic seriousness. "I wasn't brave with Catherine, I was scared all the time." "Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave," Robert explained gently. "Bravery isn't about not feeling fear. It's about facing it. You survived, Sarah. You protected yourself the best way you could. That takes incredible courage." "I learned it from you and Mom," Sarah said, leaning her head against his shoulder. The simple statement filled Robert's heart to bursting. "Your mom would be so proud of you." "She'd be proud of you too, Daddy." Robert hoped so. The past months had been a journey of rediscovery and redemption. He had stepped back from daily operations at Blackwell Technologies, placing David Mills in charge as interim CEO, while he focused on what truly mattered, being present for Sarah, rebuilding their life together. Eleanor had moved into the guest house on their new property, her presence a constant reminder of Jennifer and a source of stability for Sarah. Martha had returned as their housekeeper, her loyalty rewarded with a generous pension plan, and the knowledge that she had, in the end, helped save Sarah's life. Just last week, Robert had established the Jennifer Blackwell Foundation, dedicated to supporting child abuse victims and pioneering research into spinal injury recovery. The foundation's first initiative was a partnership with Chicago Memorial to create a specialized pediatric trauma unit, with Dr. Sophia Chen leading the medical team. The healing process was far from complete. Sarah still had nightmares. Robert still woke in cold sweats, reaching for his daughter to confirm she was safe. But each day brought small victories, moments of joy reclaimed from the darkness. "Ready to see if you can make it up the hill?" Robert asked, after they'd sat in companionable silence for several minutes. Sarah surveyed the gentle slope with determination. "I want to try without help this time." Robert nodded, rising to his feet but remaining close as Sarah gripped her wheels and began the ascent. Her small arms strained with effort, face set in concentration. Halfway up, her momentum faltered, the wheelchair threatening to roll backward. Without a word, Robert placed a steady hand on the back of the chair, not pushing, just preventing retreat. Sarah glanced up at him, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then she renewed her efforts, propelling herself forward until they reached level ground. "I did it!" she exclaimed, face flushed with triumph. "You did," Robert agreed, his chest swelling with pride. "All on your own." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Well, not completely on my own. You were there to catch me if I rolled back." "That's my job," Robert said simply. To be there when you need me, not to push you forward or hold you back, just to make sure you don't lose the ground you've already gained. Sarah considered this, wisdom beyond her years evident in her thoughtful expression. That's what protecting someone really means, isn't it? Not keeping them from trying, just making sure they're safe while they do. Your mother taught me that, Robert admitted. I didn't always listen well enough when she was here. I'm trying to do better now. They continued along the park path, spring sunshine warming their faces, the city skyline rising before them in a testament to human resilience and aspiration. Robert walked beside his daughter's wheelchair, close enough to help if needed, but giving her space to navigate her own way. "Daddy?" Sarah asked after they'd traveled in silence for several minutes. "Do you think I'll ever walk again? Like really walk?" Robert considered the question carefully, unwilling to offer false hope, yet equally unwilling to limit her possibilities. Sophia thinks there's a chance, with time and hard work. But Sarah, whether you walk or use the wheelchair, you'll always be perfect exactly as you are. Sarah nodded, absorbing this. "I think I want to try, though, even if it's hard, even if it hurts sometimes. Then I'll be right beside you, every step of the way," Robert promised, "however long it takes." As they reached a small rise overlooking the lake, Sarah pointed excitedly. "Look, the first sailing boats of spring." Indeed, white sails dotted the blue expanse of Lake Michigan, tiny against the vastness of the water, yet somehow defiant in their presence. Wind-powered vessels charting their own course despite currents and conditions. "Beautiful," Robert agreed, seeing in the distant sails a metaphor for their journey forward. Not always straightforward, subject to forces beyond their control, yet determinedly advancing toward the horizon. Sarah reached up and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart." Robert squeezed her hand gently, more than anything in the world. The moment was simple, perfect in its ordinariness. A father and daughter watching sailboats on a spring afternoon. Yet in that simplicity lay everything Robert had nearly lost, and everything he had fought to protect. 18 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Robert stood in the doorway of the physical therapy room, watching silently as Sarah gripped the parallel bars. Her face was set in concentration, sweat beading on her forehead as she slowly, painstakingly moved one foot forward. "That's it, Sarah," Dr. Sophia encouraged from nearby. "Just like we practiced. Feel the floor with your right foot, then transfer your weight." Sarah's arms trembled with effort, but her determination never wavered. One step, another, each one a victory over what Catherine had tried to take from her. Robert remained silent, not wanting to break his daughter's concentration. But when Sarah reached the end of the bars, lifting her gaze to find him watching, the pride in his eyes spoke volumes. "Did you see, Daddy?" she called, her smile radiant despite her exhaustion. "3 more steps than yesterday." "I saw," Robert confirmed, crossing to her side as Sophia helped her back into the wheelchair. "You were amazing." Dr. Sophia Chen smiled, making a note in Sarah's file. "At this rate, she might be using forearm crutches by Christmas." "Your daughter is remarkably determined, Mr. Blackwell." "Like her mother," Robert said softly. After Sophia left to prepare for her next patient, Sarah looked up at her father, her expression suddenly serious. "Do you think Mom would be proud that I didn't give up?" Robert knelt beside the wheelchair, meeting his daughter's eyes directly. "Your mother never gave up on anything she believed in, Sarah. Not ever. She fought for every day she had with us, right until the end. That same strength is in you. She'd be more than proud. She'd recognize herself in every step you take." Sarah considered this, then nodded, satisfied. I think Catherine made a mistake." "What do you mean?" "She thought hurting me would make me weak," Sarah explained, wisdom beyond her 9 years evident in her clear gaze. "But it made me stronger instead, not right away, but eventually." Robert marveled at his daughter's insight, her ability to transform trauma into wisdom. "You're right. Sometimes the things meant to break us become the things that forge us instead." "Like steel," Sarah agreed, remembering a science lesson. "Heat and pressure make it stronger." "Exactly like that." Robert rose, moving behind the wheelchair to guide it toward the exit. "Ready for ice cream? I think 3 extra steps definitely qualifies for a double scoop." Sarah's laughter, bright and uninhibited, filled the corridor as they made their way outside. In the waiting area, they passed a young boy in a wheelchair, his face drawn with the same fear and uncertainty Sarah had once shown. His parents stood nearby, speaking quietly with Dr. Sophia, their expressions a familiar mixture of hope and dread. Sarah noticed them too. As they passed, she offered the boy a small smile. "I used to be scared too," she said simply. "It gets better." The boy looked up, startled, then returned a hesitant smile of his own. Outside the hospital, Eleanor waited in the car, a book open on her lap. She looked up as they approached, her face lighting with the same pride Robert felt. "How did it go today, my brave girl?" she asked as Robert helped Sarah into the back seat. "3 extra steps," Sarah announced triumphantly, "and we're going for ice cream to celebrate." "Well deserved," Eleanor agreed, reaching back to squeeze her granddaughter's knee, a gesture that would have been impossible a year ago, when sensation in Sarah's legs had been minimal at best. As they drove home, Sarah chatted excitedly about her progress, her plans, her hopes for the future. Robert listened, marveling at the transformation. The terrified, withdrawn child of 18 months ago had blossomed into this confident, optimistic young person, undaunted by the challenges that remained. "Daddy?" Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "That boy at the hospital today, the one in the wheelchair." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "He looks scared like I used to be." "He probably is scared," Robert acknowledged. "It's a frightening thing not knowing if you'll get better." Sarah nodded, processing this. "I was thinking, maybe we could do something to help kids like him, not just at our hospital, but everywhere." Eleanor turned in her seat, her eyes meeting Robert's briefly before focusing on Sarah. "What did you have in mind, dear?" "I don't know exactly," Sarah admitted, "but I know how it feels to be hurt and scared. Maybe we could help other kids not feel so alone." Robert felt a swell of pride so intense it nearly took his breath away. After everything she had endured, his daughter's first impulse was to help others who were suffering. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said. "In fact, I've been thinking about expanding the Jennifer Blackwell Foundation. Perhaps a special program specifically for children recovering from trauma." Sarah's face lit up. "Could we call it Steps Together? Because nobody should have to take those steps alone." "Steps Together," Robert repeated, the name settling perfectly into place. "It's perfect, Sarah." That evening, as Robert tucked Sarah into bed, he found himself reflecting on the journey they had taken together. From that rain-soaked night when he had discovered Catherine's true nature, through the darkness that followed, to this moment of hard-won peace. The road had not been easy, nor was it yet complete. Sarah still had difficult days ahead, physically, emotionally, psychologically. But they would face those days together, step by step, just as they had these past 18 months. "Daddy?" Sarah murmured sleepily as he kissed her forehead. "Do you still miss Mom?" "Every day," Robert answered honestly. "But I see her in you, in your courage, your kindness, your determination, and that makes the missing easier to bear." Sarah nodded, her eyelids growing heavy. "I'm glad you kept your promise to her." "So am I, sweetheart." Robert smoothed her hair one last time. "More than you'll ever know." He sat beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly made his way downstairs where Eleanor waited with a cup of tea. "She's remarkable," Eleanor said as he joined her in the living room. "Jennifer would be so proud of the young woman she's becoming." "She would," Robert agreed, accepting the tea gratefully, "and of her mother who's been an incredible support through all this." Eleanor's eyes misted slightly. "It's been healing for me too, Robert. Being here, being part of Sarah's life, part of your life, has helped me find my way forward after Jennifer." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Two people bound not just by grief, but by love and shared purpose. "Sarah had an idea today," Robert said eventually, "for a new program through the foundation. She wants to help other children who've been through trauma. Steps Together, she's calling it." Eleanor's face softened with pride. She truly is her mother's daughter, always thinking of others, even in the midst of her own struggles. "I'm thinking of making it official," Robert continued, "setting up a dedicated fund, specialized resources, maybe even a summer camp eventually. A place where children like Sarah can heal but also find their strength." "I think it's a wonderful idea," Eleanor agreed, "and I'd like to help, if I may." As they discussed possibilities, Robert felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was the path forward, not just for Sarah, but for all of them, taking the darkness they had experienced and transforming it into light for others. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the garden with white. Another season turning, another step in the journey. Robert watched the gentle cascade, thinking of Jennifer, of Sarah, of promises kept and renewed. Some journeys couldn't be rushed or bypassed. They could only be traveled one step at a time, with patience and perseverance and faith. The path ahead would have its challenges, its setbacks, perhaps even its falls. But as Sarah had shown him, what mattered wasn't avoiding the difficulty, it was facing it together. And in that together, there was healing. There was hope. There was home. The next morning, as geese flew overhead in perfect formation, navigating by instinct and ancient wisdom toward warmer destinations, Robert watched Sarah take her first steps with forearm crutches. Her movements were halting, uncertain, but her face shone with fierce determination and triumph. 3 steps, 4, 5, each one a victory, each one a promise kept. Robert Blackwell stood ready, close enough to catch her if she fell, yet giving her the space to find her own way forward. The last protector, the steadfast father, the keeper of promises that mattered more than anything else in the world. Together, they moved forward into the waiting world, leaving the shadows behind one step at a time.